Hello, everyone, and welcome to Ventures, a show where my guests and I get to explore entrepreneurial stories, market landscapes, problem spaces, and examine together how new products and services might be able to be built, either for profit, nonprofit, or just personal ventures to benefit humanity. Really, the purpose of this show is to educate and inspire a new generation of venture builders and venture investors to make the world a better place. In today's episode, we're going to be talking about starting a business on the side and the importance of understanding product, understanding your customer, understanding the problem, figuring out how to actually execute lean methodologies where you can build something super minimal to test out whether you understand your customer, understand their problem, and understand what you think the solution might be. So today, my guests, Shay and Darby, they are co-founders of leadhonestly.com. And we get to hear their story, their unique story, about how they've continued to iterate a startup while still maintaining employment and their day jobs. And so we get to examine kind of what they do for a living during the day. And also we get to hear the story about how they launched and have been iterating Lead Honestly to serve managers and really emphasize the importance of the relationship between managers and their employees. So if you're listening to this show, you can watch it by visiting wclittle.com, and there you will see more extensive show notes and links to resources that we talk about today. And if you're watching this show, you can also listen to it anywhere that you get your podcasts. You can just search for Ventures. So with that, please enjoy this conversation with Shay and Darby. All right, welcome, Shay, Darby. Glad to have you.
Good to see you, Will. Thanks for having us.
Great to be here.
So Darby, would you mind kicking us off and tell us a little bit about you and what you're up to?
Sure. Yeah. So, I'm Darby. I work at a company called GitLab. I'm a senior engineering manager over there. So what that means is I manage a number of engineering teams, and we're building features for the GitLab product. If you don't know what GitLab is, it's a collaboration tool for software teams. So we do everything from project planning to code hosting to CI/CD, which is the area of the company that I work in. And so we're building CI features for software teams.
Cool. Welcome, Shay.
Yeah. Shay Howe. I work at a company called Active Campaign. Active Campaign is largely focused on helping growing businesses meaningfully connect and engage with their customers. Our bread and butter is automation. So think about sales or marketing automation. We definitely service that end of it with email marketing and CRM and what have you, but we also dig way deeper into customer experience automation and how do you build automation across that entire customer lifecycle. So think a heavy amount of integrations, orchestration of the data, the experiences all throughout it. And I do a bit of different things in the organization. I've done everything from I'm leading the engineering side of the house to marketing, and presently oversee all of design, all of our platform strategy, which includes would be partner management, our ecosystem, developer relations, things of that nature. So kind of digging in, honestly, all across the org in a number of different ways.
So now the two of you are entrepreneurs, and a lot of entrepreneurs listening in kind of have the day job and they have their side hustle and things that they're working on to get off the ground on nights and weekends. But before we go there, I'm curious just to learn a little bit more about the day-to-day of what you do, day after day, week after week. Kind of what does that look like in your day jobs right now? Maybe Darby, you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. So I guess, like in my role, a lot of what I'm focusing on is the team, the direct reports that I have, and then the teams that report into them. Just like keeping a pulse on how everyone's feeling, make sure the team is being productive and happy, and working on the things they want to work on, and then also making sure that aligns with like the vision for the product and for the company. And so establishing that vision, working with the folks in product that are sort of like driving that, and then sort of sharing that out with the team, making sure that everyone understands like why we're going in these directions, what's important here, and helping to like execute and be sort of successful in the delivery. So it's a bit of like people management and then like engineering, strategy and architecture.
And just to dig into that a little bit, you said you try to help making sure people are working on the things that they want to work on. How do you balance these are things people want to work on, and these are things as a company you actually have to get done?
Yeah, I mean, it can be a challenge, but it's a lot of it just is about knowing the people, like understanding like where the strengths and weaknesses are, or where the areas for growth are, like what they really want to what they want to get better at, and giving them those opportunities. And there isn't always perfect alignment there, but we try to do our best to make sure that you want to get to this level in your career, then like this is a good thing. This is a good opportunity for you. And so like put someone on a project where they can actually grow a little bit and kind of spread their wings a bit more.
How about you, Shay? What does your day to day look like?
They're all a little different. I think the theme through all of them is just growth. It's thinking about broadly as an organization, what are we doing? What is the direction we're heading? What are the goals, the strategies around that, and is the team aligned to it? So that's manifests itself in a lot of meetings, right? But talking to folks across the org of different levels of what are they working on today? What are we planning for this next quarter, right? What does 2021 look like? And digging in across that, right? It's never having one marble just in front of you. It's pacing those marbles out, right? And different levels of fidelity of those conversations as they get a little bit further out. But it's everything from let's review literally what's going to happen next week and the work going out, be it from product design, engineering, from marketing, any of the larger campaigns we might have, into next year. What's the goal? What are like the 3 core tenets that we're trying to improve upon and drive towards? And how do we begin to break that down into a plan and organize the teams around? That's what we want the end of 2021 to look like. What do we have to do each quarter? What does each month look like? What does each week look like? Like starting to distill that down and get the team operations set around it. So it's a mix.
And so you've worn a lot of different hats in the past. So maybe tell the audience a little bit about your professional background.
Yeah. It's I say I'm a mutt, like in that I studied design. That's what I went to school for. But it was always about design in the sense of how do you use design to solve a problem. I would love to just make everything look good, but it doesn't matter, right? Like if ultimately it's not solving a problem or driving some level of behavior, it could be the best looking thing in the world. It's just not going to work. And throughout my career, like I've always thought I was a great designer, but I would never know because I would design something and if it wasn't built, good luck. Like who knows if that actually would solve the problem. So I went deeper into engineering, more predominantly front-end engineering to learn how to build the things I was designing. Learned I spent a lot of time building things that ultimately weren't going to work or even didn't even serve the right market, which led me deeper into product management to understand, all right, before we go and build this, like what is the problem we're trying to solve? Who has that problem? How do they solve it today? Is it viable? Is there a market to even solve this, right? Are we wasting our time to begin with? So I've been a mutt around, I would say, the engineering, product, and design kind of triad, but I spent the better part of 10 years in hypergrowth startups. So in small to large organizations where you're going to have to wear a number of different hats and dig in a number of different areas. So taking that skill set from design, engineering, and product and putting me into a gray area or space is actually very comfortable to me. That's where I get excited, and I think I really can make like that outsized impact. So it's a bit of a mutt. Like if you siloed me into go doing one thing, I'd probably get a little bored. So I want to be stretched and challenged in that respect.
How about you, Darby? When did you start writing code? What's a little bit about your professional background?
I guess I've kind of been in this engineering world for quite a while. It was in college when I first started like writing code, I guess. So that was like the late 90s. And it was very like the world was so different back then. I gave a talk a long time ago about like the dark days of PHP and what I had to do, the first few things I was building, but really kind of like a self-taught programmer, started just like doing stuff, writing code, building apps, and the type of thing you would build in, 1999 and the type of thing you're building today is just so different. The capabilities of the browser is so different and things like that. So I've just kind of like grown with the industry and sort of grown my career throughout that time, going from, small projects to then like, kind of along the lines of what Shay has done, hyper growth startups, very large scale, very large companies, millions of users, that kind of thing. And then along the way, sort of making the move into the leadership side. So going from just writing code every day to managing teams, being like a team lead, and then more of a focused manager and then just sort of leading entire organizations. So that's sort of the trajectory that I've been on, and just kind of that whole time. I still write code today, obviously. So
I'm going to chime in for a second, Darbs, because I think you're selling yourself short on that. Like, the thing I appreciate about Darby, there's many, but I don't want to seem like there's only one. But you were very entrepreneurial, right? Like, your interest in engineering is a lot of like mine in design, in that like this is meant to solve a problem. It's not, your interest is not what can I challenge myself to write? What can I learn by adopting this new technology? Like, it's always oriented around delivering something to a customer. And you've proven that through starting your own companies, right? Running your own consulting services. Like, it's never been around just like, let me dig into the textbooks or experiment with technologies. Like, it's always been oriented around like delivering a value. And I think like, I don't want that to be missed in your background, to be honest. Like, I
appreciate you calling that out.
Yeah.
I think it's one of those things that's just sort of second nature to me. And so I don't even think about it, but you remind me of like early on when I was like trying to learn these things, it was all about like solving the problem. So it was get the book about the technology so you could learn the language, so then you could solve the problem for the customer that's paying you to do it, and, solve it in the most efficient way possible or whatever. So.
Go ahead, Will.
Yeah, that's an important distinction. I remember watching a master's thesis defense from, I think it was a mathematician or a computer science person, who was talking about how they've spent the last number of years optimizing this particular algorithm. And the way they described their joy of just diving into just how do I make this computation better? I mean, it's amazing. Like, we need people like that in the world, for sure. But I think understanding who you are and where your proclivities are, I think, will help guide you into the right roles in the career. And so, I mean, I've worked with lots of different types of software engineers. And Darby, I'm actually curious, the transition from writing your own code to management and managing other developers, I've seen that process go poorly. I mean, frankly, most of us, including myself, are not the best managers in the world. And how did you do it? Like, what did you learn along the way transitioning to actually managing developers?
Yeah. Well, and Shay can attest to this because he was there. Like, I had a really good mentor at the time, who was my manager at the company we were at, and like, he helped me a ton to understand the things that I was doing wrong. Because I mean, and I see this now with people that I work with that are making that same transition, like, just such common mistakes. Like, you think that you should still write code all day, every day, and then manage as well. So the day actually ends up being, you go to meetings all day and then you write code all night, and then you're just doing two jobs. So how do you like delegate, and how do you let go of the thing that you're so attached to because you've been writing the code? Or how do you decide the things not to do, And so a lot of that helped. A lot of that came from my manager at that company, and he helped a ton with that. But then it's, sort of just getting comfortable with making those mistakes and learning from them, and continually growing, because you're not going to know it all, and you got to get comfortable with that. And I think that like those little bits of advice really helped to make it not feel like the sky was falling when you're just like in the deep end and you don't know what you're doing. The thing that I tell everyone now when I'm helping them through this process is like, this is a career change. You're doing a completely different job. You're writing code every day. Now you're not writing code anymore, even though you want to. and now you're managing people, and you got to think about the way you communicate and how that's different, and how you delegate, and how you push priority and things like that. So like framing it that way, I think helps people.
So have you, a lot of questions we get from startup CTOs that are going from themselves to just the next hire. They may only have budget for one person. And I hear a lot of mixed opinions about whether you hire junior, mid, senior, how you go about that hire number two. I'm curious if you have thoughts on that.
That's a good question. I think it's got to be situational. You got to understand like what you need from that person. So is it like if you're a CTO that was writing all the code and now you need someone to help, is it a case where you want to delegate everything to that person, or do you have specific things or specific features, or what does the organization look like in which you're operating, and so how can you cater that towards those needs? I think probably what a lot of people are looking for is like a clone of themselves. And in that case, you're not going to find it, even if you get the most senior person. So probably don't think of that, but think of like what is a good, what do you spend the most time doing, and what can you delegate out to somebody else? And then, like if you bring in someone who is, more junior in their career, make sure that you're budgeting that time to mentor them and teach them, because you're going to give them the code and they're going to not know anything about anything because you've been writing that code for however many years, right? Everything in and out. But that person is not going to know anything, and they're going to be very intimidated, and try to put yourself in their shoes and think about like, all right, if I was in this position, what would I be going through, and what sort of imposter syndrome would I be feeling, and things like that. And so make sure you're ready to like commit to that before you even consider bringing that person in, because if you don't, that person won't be successful. You'll create a bad time for everyone, and then it probably won't work out. So I guess that's my advice at this point.
So it's cool. I appreciate that. I think that's helpful. I think the two of you have gone the transition from being makers, being designers, being engineers, to transitioning into management, and that probably leads a little bit into the story of what you're up to now. Shay, do you want to talk a little bit around the origin story and of what you're up to here?
Yeah, for sure. Well, the story goes back pretty far. Darby and I actually met. We were both working basically in a venture capital studio. We were on a team that had recently raised money from a venture capitalist. And we were basically, I was product design, Darby was engineering, and we had, I think, one other contractor, but it was us to just tag team and like take down the world, frankly. That lasted 7 months. I think it was a start and stop pretty quick. But out of it, like we basically learned like, okay, like it's the right hand shaking the left, like where my skills like stop, Darby's take off, right? And I think vice versa, but a gray area in between where we found how to work really well together, where I can go and do the design and largely the front end development. Darby can pick up the back end, also pick up the front end development. But I think both of us would press it on the product side, right? Like some of the strongest product decisions we've made have been from us arguing with one another over this. But I'd say we cut our chops working on building a company there. And from there went on to Groupon, built a team there to help redesign the consumer web experience. I did that for well over a year. And then coming out of it, went back into, honestly, that venture capital studio and joined a company called Belly, where essentially Darby was on the engineering side, I was on product and design, and we spent a good 4 years building, growing teams, raising money, run every single emotion of a startup in that life cycle. We lived and breathed for quite some time, and I'd say that's where we learned a lot of our leadership lessons. That's where Darby talks about like having a good mentor, like building out that team, like getting the growth under you, because it's one in 4 years we raised, I think it was $30 million. We'd hire folks. We would try and get things to market to grow and scale, but then we'd have to lay some folks off. we'd find that rock, then we'd hire more or raise more money, we'd hire more folks. So I think the thing Darby and I really learned in that phase of our careers was not one necessarily of how to build a product. Like I think we had edged that out at that point, like and somewhat like maybe like arrogant in that like there's no problem we couldn't solve in some respects. But it was, how do you take a team through that? Like how do you build a team, right, from the seeds into something large? How do you dismantle it, right, and then try and rebuild it? And how do you do that in a way that like builds a sustainable culture? Because that is turbulent times at their best. We came up with a few practices, and one was Darby and I would spend a lot of time just thinking about how are you engaging, the members of your team. And very specifically, like boil that into like what type of questions are you asking them in your one-on-ones? Because what we didn't want was every conversation with an employee to be, "How's it going? How are you feeling?" And it was because you knew the answers. You'd be like things are on fire. I don't like. there's no better answer. It is what it was last time we spoke. There are highs and lows, and some of it is situational. We're doing our best. That's a hard conversation to have every time you sit down with your manager, right? Like the relationship's not growing. There's no depth to that connection over time. So eventually you're going to burn yourself out. You're going to split the ends and, things will fall apart. So Darby and I just came up with, how do we change that conversation and narrative? How do we get folks thinking more introspectively around how they could drive and promote change in the culture of our workplace? How could we learn to be better leaders? How could we grow and mentor our own teams? And how could we get them working closer together? So we kind of came up with a process of throwing questions in Google Docs, sending them out to the team before, we'd sit down with them individually. And I think we really started to unpack some learnings throughout that process and who the team members were, who we were as leaders, and like how we could build more empathy into that larger culture. Ultimately, that was like that light bulb idea of like, this startup might not work, but what we built to help operationalize and run the business might actually be the better idea. It might actually be like the one that spun out of this, right? Yeah. Like a Slack story of sorts, right? Like they built an internal communication tool to help them organize their teams, and that actually became the excelling product. So that's what we did. We essentially productized a platform to help managers grow their relationships and connect with their teams, and largely doing so with one-on-one meetings and having presets of playbooks of questions to ask, surveys to run, and a way to kind of track the engagement across your team and with individual team members.
So how did you go about the process of deciding, testing whether to actually give this new idea a go?
Yeah, I'll let Darby tell the story.
Yeah, this is my favorite story. So this was probably about 4 years ago.
4, yeah,
4. So we had just sort of wrapped up at Belly, and we're taking some time off before starting our next jobs. And we'd always been talking about like, let's work on something. Let's do an idea. Let's do our own thing. And we kicked around some ideas, and Shay brought forward this idea, which was like, let's take the questions that we've used for our one-on-ones, put them in an email and send them to people so that they can use them for their teams. It's like, that's a cool idea. I like that. And then Shay said, we should charge for it too. I was like, I don't think anyone's going to pay for that. And Shay was like, no, I think they will. And so we said, well, let's try it out. And so what we did is we spent about 2 weeks on it, I think. And it was, let's build a landing page. Let's hook it up to a Stripe form and then see what happens. So we built nothing else besides that. It was literally just the landing page and the form where people could put in their credit card.
A checkout app. You can any landing page service is going to give you what we built.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. And so then we put it out on social media, and I think we put it on like Product Hunt. Mm-hmm. And the whole idea was, let's build the least that we can build to validate this idea and see if anyone will put in their credit card. And what we had said was, we'll give you 2 weeks to try it out for free. So if you cancel within that 2 weeks, you never get charged, but you have to put your credit card in to start. And we launched it on a Monday, which meant that our first batch of questions, we would have 7 days before we have to send them to folks. So that gave us like the maximum amount of time. If it did work, then we would have some time to figure out how we were going to send these questions. And so we launched it. I can't remember the number now. I feel like it was something like in the first few days, we got about 20 people that signed up.
I remember this very specifically because I remember putting it on Product Hunt, emailing a few friends, and going to get ramen, and came back to 10 different people had signed up. And I remember calling Darby like, cool.
Yeah.
We have to build a process that's actually going to send these questions now because we have nothing. And even the idea of someone wanting to cancel, there's no way to cancel. Like you have to email us to say, I don't want to be charged. Like there's no platform. There was no like login or application or any way to like actually stop your payment. So
I forgot about that part.
It was under the gun quickly. Yeah. And this also fell between Christmas and New Year's, which is arguably the worst time to launch a project. But it was when we weren't busy. So it's when we put it up, and it actually got some quick traction.
Yeah. So but like my favorite part about that is like how we spent the least amount of effort on this to try it out. And then based on getting feedback, people putting in their credit cards, like that was such a clear signal to us that this is something that people are interested in. So we should spend more time on it. We should build it out more. And I think we had, by the time, I don't know, a month in or so, we had, people kept signing up. We're just like, this is crazy. What's going on? And so it totally validated the idea. But then as we started our new jobs, it also helped us to like balance the motivation to do it, right? Like, because we're not just like writing code every weekend in hopes to launch something in a few months or whatever. Like we have paying customers today. And so we have to support them. We have to give them the product they asked for. And then like, let's continue to develop this thing because there's obviously something here. So that's like my big takeaway from all of this was like, if you're ever trying to launch something, try to get something out to customers as soon as possible. And a lot of people tell you this, but it's not always obvious how to do it, which can be the hard part. But I feel like we found the right balance there in this case.
So where did you go from there? You ran a test, you got people interested in it, they put their credit in, you have day jobs, you're trying to juggle, family life, work-life balance, the whole nine. What did you do from there?
Ooh, this is we're still doing this from there. We're still doing it. It's listening to the customer, like slowly iterating on it. I remember that first year. This is so wild. Like people would sign up. We finally automated a script to actually add them to a MailChimp list. We had a free MailChimp account by which I would send a campaign to every Monday. So I was literally sending email campaigns by hand. We started to automate that process a little bit, but we'd still have to build the questions into a back end of the database, all this stuff. And we had the vision of like where to go with it, right? Like eventually folks are going to want to log in. They're going to want to be able to track historical meetings and see what they said in the past. So they're going to want a platform to do that. They're going to want a place to track action items, the discussions that actually happen, right? If we're having a meeting, there's an outcome, all right? Let's make sure we're recording that. Let's make sure we have the agenda items of if we want to add our own topics to meetings. All these different features, right? Pulse surveys, analytics around how you're actually digging in have all been things like you're kind of thinking about like, we're probably going to need these, but they've all been driven by our customers in that scenario. When the need comes up, and where like we basically hear from them, we go build things. And it's been interesting. Like originally we had just a Asana board that had like every customer email and request. So someone says that I want this, I'll literally copy their email address and their message, if not a screenshot, put it into this ticket, if you will, in Asana. And the next person who asked for it, I'd do the same thing. I'd copy it and put it on that same ticket, and I'd increase the count to say, okay, 2 people have asked for this versus 1. And it didn't take but a few months where you had 10 people asking for the same thing, right? And Darby and I just started checking them off the top, right? As they came in to say, most requested feature, let's go build it. And we would orient ourselves around like, well, it's not that's what they want, let's go build it. It was, that's the problem. How can we solve that, right? And then maybe it's a little bit different than what they're asking for, but I think in tighter alignment to the vision of how we actually want to build the business. That's like still what we do today. I think there's like one operating mechanism we've been really good about putting in place, and that is which twice a year, Darby and I go on a retreat. We will basically, this is going to be fun. We pick a city that we both love, but isn't too exciting so that we don't get distracted by all the fun things we could be doing in that city. And we go there for basically an extended weekend. So we'll probably fly out on a Thursday night and fly back Sunday night. And we'll dig in. We'll try and have our own little code retreat. And we've done this basically twice a year for the last 4 years now. And that has been like some major milestones and big pushes on our work, where we'll go spend a weekend together, go deep in conversation, plan things out, and get a head start on it moving. And that basically creates momentum that will pull us through to the next one, to be quite honest. We get our teeth sunk into something, and we can then finish it when we get home. What would you add, Darbs?
Yeah, I think that that covers a lot of it. I guess there's maybe one other aspect of product development that I'd want to kind of highlight. And I think we've done this a lot more recently, but it's kind of been part of this all the way through. And there's sort of a through line on this, because this comes from something we were doing at our day job back at Belly. And it's basically like dog fooding your own product, or there's other terms that people call it, but
drink your own champagne.
Yeah, that's maybe a better one. So like I use this with my teams. So I'm using the product every single week, almost every day. Shay and I use it to coordinate like our weekly sync ups too. And so we've done that more as the product has been more advanced, and we can leverage more of the tools. But you learn so much by like using your thing as a user. And so you get a lot of this great feedback from customers, and absolutely there's like tons of great stuff that we get that way too. But then my use case is maybe different than your use case, but we're still learning other things as we do that too. And so I think that's been super helpful in continuing to like push forward and really seeing it from the inside too.
Yeah. One of the things like I always think a lot about too is like this was born out of how we led our teams. This is not like an epiphany we had one day just walking down the street. Like it's not a made up idea. This is like a real problem we both experienced, and where we've found success, right? Like I always told Darby, like if no one ever used this, I will. And that's what matters in many respects, right? Like this will make me a better leader. So I want it. And other people tell me they want it, which is great. We'll see if they do. But worst case, I'm going to use it. And I think that's given us some like pretty sharp opinions on like how to build the product. And it's fun to look back 4 years and think like HR platforms like 4 years ago were not anywhere close to like what we were doing. And now they're popping up left and right. Like the competition is thick. But I don't know that they have the backbone and like understanding of this is the problem and how to solve it that we do. Like we don't provide largely organizational stats to managers of managers, right? So if I, in this scenario, reported to Darby and Will, you reported to me, Darby would never be able to see the conversations we have. He would never have access to the questions or answers. He could see that we're having conversations. He could see how many questions you've answered, or he could see how many action items we've created, but he'll never see the content of that conversation. And the reason is like trust needs to exist between me and you, and that we can have a meaningful, rich conversation and it doesn't get outside our relationship. And it's if Darby could see it, that the trust is fractured, that you become a bit more reserved because, others can have eyes on those responses. And the whole idea of what we're trying to basically accomplish in that relationship falls apart. And that's a small example of where I start to see like these platforms just like splinter off in different areas. And at the end, to me, like, it's like, you don't understand the problem. Like you have a sense of it and you get ephemeral notes of it, but you're not like, you haven't lived it. You haven't experienced it. Some folks haven't even been managers and they're building the platforms, right? It's like, it's just a different take. Right. And I think that's helped us quite a bit.
I think the thing I'll add to that too is, if I'm running one of these companies and I've got a bunch of VC money and I've got investors I have to pay off, there's a lot of pressure to sell to as many customers as I can. And that sort of ends up diluting some of maybe the good intentions you had when you started the thing. And so I like to think that that's a competitive advantage we have to some respect, because we're just like a bootstrap self-funded company. We don't have any of that to worry about, and we can sort of stick to our guns when we want to like keep a feature that way. And there's certainly been people that have asked us for exactly what Shay's describing, right? And it's like, well, we can say that doesn't really fit with our vision for this product, and that's okay. You can maybe find a different tool for that job. So, yeah.
So in a nutshell, for those who aren't familiar, what is the problem you're solving? Who is the customer? And tell us a little bit about the current feature set.
Yeah, we missed that part. Yeah. Yeah, like the problem is like, how do you build relationships with your team? You're a manager, you have direct reports, employees on your team. How do you engage with them? How do you build that connection? How do you grow your relationship in ways that align them, much like Darby was saying earlier, like his entire job, right? Like, how do I take someone's interest and align that in a situation where it drives business value? Lead Honestly is focused on that, right? Helping basically connect those two and really embody the relationship a manager can have with their team. The process of that is one-on-one meetings. So Lead Honestly is a platform by which you can add your employees. You put those employees into what we call playbooks. So playbooks are groups of questions that are themed. So it could be, this is a new employee on my team, so I'm going to put them into an onboarding playbook. And through a sequence of meetings and one-on-ones, they'll ask them different questions. In that scenario, it'd be, how do you like to receive feedback? How do you like to be rewarded? What's something you really appreciated about previous managers? What have you not liked about previous managers? So ways to help kind of like establish the relationship. You might have a different playbook that is around developing leaders. So you might say, that person I think is going to be promoted. I think they'd be a great manager. So let's start asking them questions around, who on the team is doing great work but is under highlighted, right? Who should we be recognizing? What's the hardest decision you've had to make in the past week? Why was it hard, right? What would you change about what you know now? So that's one set of it, of features and functionality. There's also pulse questions. So you can ask the whole team, what's your morale? How are you feeling, right? So peaks and valleys charts to say, hey, Will just shot up. His morale is super high. What's going on, right? Let's go have a conversation. Or Shay's super low. Like, I wonder what's going on. Like, we definitely need to tune into that. And then there's ability to add agenda items, track the action items. There's integrations to Google Calendar, Slack, and a number of different ways you can go from there. What would you add, Darb?
Yeah, I think that you covered it. It's really sort of evolved from this thing that was really focused around questions in terms of like building engagement to the tool that I can use for my entire one-on-one meeting. I don't need other tools to do it. So I need this, and then Google Calendar, because that's where the calendar invite goes. Other than that, it like everything can be self-contained there, and you can have the whole picture of an individual on your team that way. And so that's been kind of the direction that we've been growing in terms of like expanding features that just make it more of just like a holistic thing. Like this is the one-on-one meeting thing that I use. It's the only tool that I need.
So a scenario that comes up a lot in early stage startups, and I see this all the time, is there's an idea person and they really want something built, and they maybe have a sales or a business background, and they either spend some of their own money or they spend some friends and family money to hire a developer or a freelancer or an offshore team to kind of cobble together something. And those stories usually end up not successful, to say the least. And we talk a lot about product and product people. What is that? What advice for if those who are listening in who are business people who want to build something, either let's say a digital software product, and maybe they have a little bit of money and they're just curious about how should I go about doing this, and what is this mysterious product person or product things that I need to be aware of?
Yeah, I can dig into the Darbs and then chime in, but there's a couple of different ways to look at that, and I have opinions. Those are certainly shaped by my experience, my background. So I realize like mine could be different than others, and the answer I have might not be suitable for everyone. But my first like pause there is like, make sure that like you really need to solve that problem. We all have great ideas, and they are all great ideas conceived in our minds. Are those shared great ideas? And I think there's a way to go about asking questions and just doing a layer of research that is not self-fulfilling either, right? If I go to Darby and say, hey, I have this idea, would you use this? He doesn't want to upset me. He's gonna be like, yeah, probably. Like I would consider using it, right? Versus, yeah, a more discovery conversation, like in this scenario, in this context, right? I could go to Darby and just be like, what tools are you using to like engage your team, or what type of struggles are you having? Because like I'm stumbling on this part, right? And I have my idea in the back of my head, but I'm not leading with it. I'm doing more discovery to unpack how he's solving the problem I believe I can solve, and see like, I don't know, maybe that's not a problem for him, or maybe it's not a problem that carries as much weight as it does for me, or maybe he actually has a pretty good solution, so mine's not going to work, right? Like part one to me is like just go suss that out with a few folks, and go from approach of discovery, not like looking for validation, quite frankly. Part two to me then is I am a very kinesthetic person. Like I learn by doing these things. My inclination is not to go pay someone to do things most of the time. As a leader, one of the hardest things I struggle with is delegation, quite honestly. Like I want to do them. They sound fun. It seems like a good problem. And in that scenario, like if I had an idea, like there's enough like no code, like low code, solutions out there that like you could probably scaffold together your idea into a way that is workable without writing a single line of code. No disrespect to Darby or Will. But like, yeah, I mean, I like Notion probably solves most problems you have right now, right? Like you get like this database in the background, you could build some UIs on top of it, right? Like you could throw in some automation with ActiveCampaign or what have you. Like I think you could structure out like most products in a very like low to no code manner just to see if there's traction behind it. That's essentially what we did with Lead Honestly, right? Like it's a checkout page. And it wasn't until like we had customers, we heard from them where they wanted it to grow and evolve, that we actually started really writing code to support it. And that's where I'd like push people is like, get some traction, get like revenue going behind something before you really start to like invest in what would be the development of it. You are all welcome to disagree with me on that. Again, that's just shaped by my experience or how I perceive things, but I realize I'm a little unique in that.
Yeah, I think I obviously agree with a lot of that. I think validating the problem, like a lot of times as someone who did consulting forever, people would come to me all the time with a solution to a problem, but they would not necessarily be able to convey that that's actually a problem, or just like even have evidence that they have this idea in their head of something they want to build, and they've sort of like backed into the problem that they want to solve, or somehow they got there. But they start with the end and then back into, all right, this is we got to do all these things and then we'll get a customer. So we'll work on this for 6 months. And early in my career, I built so many apps like that. I mean, I would work for 3 or 4 months on something and like we never got a customer for that thing, or it had like 5 users. Like that sucks. So like try to validate that up front, and then try to build a business first. Like do things that don't scale. If let's say you're building an app that's like connecting people from one group with another group, you're creating a marketplace, for example, or something, like don't go build the whole thing first. Like put up a form, and then your job is to sit on the phone in the background and be the robot that's like coordinating the transactions or whatever. Like there's no reason you can't do that. It's automated. Yeah, right. It's a mechanical Turk all day. So it won't scale, but then you can prove out that anyone's even going to call you to begin with, or try your service, and then you're going to learn a ton along the way too, because you're going to be talking to people instead of just like building a bunch of software and then like putting it off on a website somewhere that people may never end up at. And there's a lot of reasons that those things that you built and you spend 6 months building weren't successful, right? Like maybe the idea was great, maybe all the mechanisms that were built were great, but maybe just you didn't have the right advertising associated with it, or people just didn't know enough about it. We built Lead Honestly, we told a few people about it, we got some customers, but like this isn't like a product that everyone knows about. like telling people about the thing that you're building is also very hard. Probably harder than building the thing.
100%.
Yeah. So, so then, things like this can end up, sort of like falling by the wayside, not because there was anything wrong with that solution, but just because no one got to it, no one could find it.
Yeah, it's a lot. And you touched on something there, Darby. Like, a lot of folks talk about product market fit. I don't know, that's probably largely understood, but the idea of the product you're building actually fits the market, and you can retain them as a customer because they find value in your service, and you're able to make money off that, right? You can begin to scale that. You have founder market or founder product fit, right? And I'd say that's probably like quintessential Darby and I. This is a problem we experienced, so we know how to innately solve that. There's another layer folks talk about, which is like the actual channel product fit, right? Like, do you have a good channel by which you can grow your business, and that people will be attracted to what you're offering? That's the one folks probably ignore the most, and is the one that largely kills most businesses. And that, like, you have you might have good ideas, you might have even the best idea, but if you can't get the word out on it and you can't find the right channel to grow, it's not going to work. And Darby and I are builders by heart, right? Like, that's building is easy to us. It is, I'd say, the channel side that's very difficult.
So it sounds like what I'm hearing is the advice for the idea person is first put the product hat on and validate that there is even a problem there. And there are a variety of tips and tricks, and you've mentioned already a few of them, to go about actually validating an idea and not just having your own biases that you're looking for validation from. What else have you tried, or what else have you seen other entrepreneurs try in terms of ways of allowing other people to give really negative feedback, or like really kill off that idea, to get over those biases? Like, what kind of tricks have you or tips have you seen?
Well, I'll let Darby start.
I mean, I think, like Shay touched on this a little bit, is like go and validate your idea with people. Like, talk to people that will give you like real feedback and like aren't going to sugarcoat it. So don't talk to your best friend, right? Talk to someone who maybe isn't in the industry that you're in. Like, we live in a bubble, so like talk to people that are in like very different worlds, like if you're, depending on the type of product you're trying to sell, right? Like, if you're trying to sell something that is like consumer facing, like talk to consumers that aren't like tech nerds. Talk to your parents, maybe, maybe they're not good because they'll soften the feedback too much, but like, try to find all those like different people that you can get feedback from. Present it in a way that is not like leading. Like, try to think about how you can ask those questions of people that doesn't like push them to agree with you. And that's very hard to do because you have an idea and you just want to get people to like give it a thumbs up. And I think like, the more sort of external inputs you can get, the better. And then start out with something as small as you can, like getting back to kind of what we were saying earlier, like things that don't scale. Like, what is a way to get signal from the world? Like the whole lean startup thing is built around this. Like, can you launch a product which is just a landing page and then go sell a bunch of ads around it or whatever, and get like actual real humans to come and click on your thing and engage with it? I think that's a really great way to get feedback, because those are just unsolicited, participants in your experiment. I don't know if you had anything else, Shay.
Yeah. Well, in terms of like talking to folks, right? Like validating that idea, there's a book it's a short book that kind of summarizes it, I think, quite well, called The Mom Test. Have either of you read it?
No, I haven't.
Oh yeah, I think both of you would love it. I think it's written by Rob Fitzpatrick, I believe. Short book. It's like 150 pages, very founder friendly. Right? It's not the book that the experienced user experience researcher or designer is going to go get. It's the book around like, hey, you're a founder, you have an idea. how do you talk about that idea? How do you validate it? And it's purely that, right? It's like, it's the discovery end of don't lead with your idea. Like, how do you even I won't even call folks or be like, hey, can we get some time on the calendar to talk about my idea? Like, it's just the interaction you have. You're in research mode, right? Like, it's I'm passing someone on the street and I like bump into them. Oh, hey, what do you do? Oh, I'm VP over here. Interesting. Tell me about the size of your team. Like, what's that look like? Oh, what are your struggles with that? Like, just, you're not like, that's interesting, I'd love to learn more about that. Can we set up some time and have a call? Like, no, just do it there, right? 5-minute conversations can start to chip away at like shaping your idea. And don't over index it. Don't try and think it has to be perfect. And when we're like in the tax of actually building something, I want to talk to 5 people. I don't need to talk to 20. I don't need to talk to 30. I need to talk to 5 folks. And after 5 folks, I'm going to have a pretty good idea, because they're going to start to repeat some of the patterns or trends of what they're saying, and that, okay, this is the direction we need to go. I think other folks like over-index on surveys. And they're like, oh, I could go to SurveyMonkey and I could get an audience to go tell me this, or I could drive feedback to this forum and learn something. And you can, that's great. But you'll never be able to ask those people why. And if you put an open text box on that page to say why, you're not going to get the answer. You're going to get, 40 characters of because I think so, what have you, right? Like, to me, the qualitative is far more important than the quantitative. And I always talk about being like data influenced, not driven. Like, you have to talk to the customers, and you don't have to talk to a lot of them. You just got to get into the weeds with them a little bit. And that's like when I'm talking to founders and like people starting, like I'm always orienting in that direction. Don't make it harder than it has to be. Don't rely on surveys. Like, every conversation is research. Is kind of how I think about it.
Yeah, I think to just follow up with that a little bit, I think the thing I've seen a lot that people do to your point is try to build a scalable process around everything. So if it's surveys, like, oh, I could survey 1,000 people, like, that'd be great. Look at how well this scales. And I think I think scaling is a bit of a trap. And you can be sort of overly fixated on that instead of actually answering your question. Talking to a few people is probably all you need. And you don't need a process and a structure around it. Just like, get out there and ask some people things, or if you find yourself in a situation where you're just talking with some people, like, think about those things that you want to get information on, and work that into the conversation or whatever. It doesn't have to be a on or off sort of thing. So, yeah.
And how did the two of you balance the classic dilemma between having a product vision and hearing feedback from your customers, right? I mean, a common story I hear is you get your first handful of customers and they tell you a bunch of stuff that is very different than your vision, right? There's sort of one end of the spectrum, you're Steve Jobs, and you just say, people are going to love this, and he's just going to move forward and build it. Whereas on the other side, you only build what the small number of people, the small number of data points tell you. Like, how do you think about juggling that?
Yeah, it's difficult. Honestly, it's very difficult. I said, like, we were pretty opinionated earlier, and that, like, is true, right? And that's because we've experienced that problem. But I'm honestly continually testing that opinion. So the example I shared was like not sharing data, in skip levels. We've lost customers over that idea. And I don't like that. That's not like, as a founder, every customer is like, you want to hold on to, right? So in those conversations, I go into that research mode. I start to understand, well, what's your goal? Why do you want that information? Like, do you really care what that person's saying? Or are you more interested in the sentiment? Because we could use a machine learning algorithm to pull out sentiment of keywords and tell you if it was a positive or negative experience. That's like a layer of data we could expose without actually sharing the context of it, maybe. Like, there's always like layers, I think, to like experiment and explore and kind of test the hypotheses of like, these are our strong opinions. And we can hold true to those values, but that doesn't mean that like we also couldn't solve the other side of that coin, where someone really wants to know, and more times than not want to talk to them, they're just like, I just want to know that meetings are happening. I want to be able to hold my managers accountable to talking to their employees. I'm like, great. I'll tell you how many meetings they're having and when the last one was. And most of the time, I'm like, awesome. That's all I needed, right? Like, I don't have to go in so hot-headed to be like, no, you'll never get that information. It's private. It's under like vault and key. It's like, well, no, like maybe there's like a way to expose a little bit of it, but still hold true to the values we want to establish as an org. And I use that as an example because I think you can still have your vision. You can still be very strong on what you think that product vision is, right? But do discovery even on that as you get into it. Like continually talk to those customers where you're getting a little bit of pressure or you feel as if they're pulling a different direction to see why. And sometimes you begin to realize it's not that they're opposed against you. They're just thinking about it a little bit different. They have a different lens, a different context to their request that you can solve in a way that's not actually giving them what they're saying they are, directly asking for, but you can solve it in a different way that still meets the values you have or the way you see the product.
This kind of gets back to the people coming with a solution.
Mm-hmm.
People do that all the time, right? They're like, I need this thing here. And then when you start to poke it, like, well, why do you need that? What is it? Like, then it turns into more of a conversation about the needs instead of like the prescriptive solution that they've developed in their head.
Yeah. I'm curious to ask a nuts and bolts question. So you have the landing page up, you have the credit card, people are putting their credit cards in, you have something. So let's say you're at that stage. How do you go about the process of actually building the product? I know the two of you are product people, engineer, design, but what are the nuts and bolts of that initial roadmap, right? You need to prioritize what you're going to build, and then how do you go about actually building it? What did that process look like?
I'll jump in with this one. I think this is like kind of the sweet spot where Shay and I really work together well because I kind of remember back that far, and it was definitely like all right, we got to build something. Let's like throw up the list of everything that we think needs to be part of this, and then like, okay, how can we pull this back to the minimum again? And so that build was a significant one from a form to an app where you can log in, because there's two different types of users that we have. We have a manager and we have an employee. So like, what do those experiences look like, and how do they log in, and how do we make it the least amount of friction possible? And so we really kind of like worked through all of the, the features that we felt were needed for that first version, tried to strip it down to the least amount so that we could get something out as soon as possible. And then, that was more of a classic, like, all right, let's go home for a while and work on this. But I don't think we spent that much time. I think it was maybe a couple months. I can't remember exactly now, but but then it was like, let's get something out there as soon as possible, and then continue to iterate on that from there.
Very embarrassingly did we build it, I believe, and I would never do it any different, to be honest with you. Like, I remember it was like the feature list is a mile long in that scenario, right? Like you have the vision for where this could go, and you have paralysis on where to get started. And I remember it was just like, well, who needs to log in first? Managers. They're the one managing. They need to add their employees to the platform. Step one. Okay, let's get a manager log in. All they can do is log in and add their employees. They can't change the questions. They can view the responses. That's it. And they're like, manager's like, well, I want to be able to edit the questions. I want to be able to change them. Okay, let's build that feature, that functionality. We went a year and had dozens of employees, hundreds of employees, like, hey, how do I log in? It's like, you don't. We'll just email you the questions. We'll send you a URL to a landing page that's soft logged in. It's tokened. You put your answers there and you're good to go. They're like, well, how do I see my previous questions? You're like, well, go back to your email and then click the link and go to it. Like embarrassing of a product, right? But for a year, employees couldn't even log in. And I remember sitting in a coffee shop in Portland with Darby going, hey, employees need to log in now. We have to bite this bullet. And like, it seemed impossible. We were like, there's no way we could, like, how do we change the entire data model? And it was honestly just like probably a 2 or 3 hour conversation, pencil and paper, of scribbling, throwing away different models to get this to work, right? And that's just been the entire process, right? So now we have employees and managers logging in. It's like, Well, now they both want to be able to add discussion topics. Okay, great. Let's let them add discussion topics. They want to be able to comment and thread replies on discussion topics. Okay, great. Let's add that in. Some managers want to be able to add discussion topics that are private, right? Because they're going to talk about something sensitive that requires context. Cool. Let's add a feature flag around having a private topic. Oh, we didn't get to talk about this topic. We want the ability to move it to the next meeting. Okay, great. Let's add the ability to punt items across meetings. Like, it's been one where you just chip away at it, honestly, slowly but surely. And there are, every day it seems as if it's impossible, right? Like, I look back 4 years and I'm like, holy smokes. Like, actually the platform we have is so incredibly rich and powerful, but like 4 years ago, had I thought about it in this scenario, I would have begun, because it would have seemed impossible. It would have been so hard and like so monumentous to build that like we had to take the slow and embarrassing way to get here. And now it is magical. We can rip features out in a weekend because the infrastructure is there, right? Like Darby built a few things this weekend. There's just like multiple things in a weekend, right? Because they're just so easy to kind of like plow through, because a lot of that sits there.
Yeah, but we also, sorry, go ahead.
Honestly, that's not also always the case either, right? There's a lot of things we want to do. It's like, oh, that's fundamentally going to break a lot of stuff. Like, how do we actually go do that?
There's some big ones. The other part of it is just like the culture that we've developed around, like, you know, building the smallest thing that we can and shipping it as soon as we can, because we've definitely gotten into, we've fallen into this trap before. We've gotten stuck a couple times when we've like built too much, and it's been like, takes 3 months to get something out or 6 months to get something out. And it's like, wow, that took way too long. Like, why didn't we make that smaller? Why didn't we make this more iterative? And now I think we've kind of come through that a bit better. And we're just like, all right, let's like, what is the smallest version of this that we can build? And like, how do we scale this back? Like, yeah, we want to do all these things, but like, what's the thing I can build in a weekend?
Yeah.
That we can ship.
You're talking to like, we do this for a living. We lead teams that do this for a living. Yet if you want to see our release notes, it's in the footer of our website that links to a Google Doc. It's like, we're capable of building a landing page that talks about our release notes. But I was like, just put it in a Google Doc. It's the easiest way to manage this. Like, let's just roll. And folks, like, they don't care if it looks perfect. Like, they just want to know that there are releases happening, right? And if someone complains that it's in a Google Doc, we'll change it later. But like, not today.
Right. That's good. That's good. So where are you heading? We're specifically with Lead Honestly. What is the vision in the, let's say, the short to medium term future here?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I'll give an answer, and Darby, like, please chime in. Like, we are focused on that relationship between managers and their employees. So what you're not going to find in Lead Honestly is the ability to submit time off. You're not going to find payroll capabilities in there, right? Like, you're going to find more features and functionality around how do you continue the conversation and provide feedback to one another. How, as a manager, do you grow in your career? Do you grow the employees on your team? How do you build more operational excellence around what you're delivering, right? And we have folks we have HVAC technicians that use Lead Honestly. We have churches and ministries that use it. We have software engineering teams. Like, the actual audience is quite wide, but it's focused around how do we allow those folks to grow and have high psychological safety and enjoyment in their work, right? And thinking that is fundamentally like the way the economy is changing, less so from like a factory worker space. And that this year, I think, has been like more prevalent than ever, right? As folks have moved more into a remote work environment. You have the largest civil rights movement in world history. Like, these things are very stressful, very emotional things, and we're building the tools and functionality, I think, to empower teams to talk about those, to kind of grow through those and not get, I don't know, like stabilized or set in a core or stone cold. What do you think, Darbs?
Yeah, I think it's a lot of that. It's really kind of focused on like our core mission, and just kind of continually expanding that. And we come up with ideas, I think, like super often, and we get these from customers, we get them from using it ourselves. And so like I don't think that there's any shortage of things that we can do to improve that relationship. And it's really about like, what can what guidance can we provide to managers to help make that relationship better, and then what can we also provide to employees, because there's two sides to this relationship, but they have very different dynamics. There's the power dynamic, there's the motivation dynamic, there's the there's just like a lot that goes into that. So how do we make this how do we productize that a little bit, but knowing that there's a lot of different scenarios or a lot of different demographics, from the electricians to the ministries to the software engineering teams. I mean, like, all of those people are quite different. But I think that kind of continuing to build down that path, and then just like looking at kind of where the industry is headed, where we're going in, remote work and things like that. Like there's just, the next year or two, there's going to be a lot more of that than there was last year. So like, are there things that we can do to improve that experience for people? So yeah, it's just kind of a lot of, again, sort of chipping away at that roadmap and continually adding those things to make the product better.
So broadly speaking, in software startup land, there's roughly three buckets. There's sort of consumer facing software, there's marketplaces, and there's business to business software. And obviously there's lots of kind of nuance between and different spectrums between all of those. But how do you see your product? How do you think about your product in that rough spectrum there?
Yeah. Oh, I love this question. I think that answer, Will, is that landscape is changing like quickly. And that you're seeing a lot of, frankly, B2B businesses have to almost have a consumer grade experience, right? Consumers have always had higher expectations for the way things should perform and how they should look and what have you. And honestly, B2B has gotten away with probably a little more arcane design, a little more arcane product, but locked into larger contracts and things like that. So I think expectations around that has totally shifted. And you see companies like Slack, right? You see Atlassian, you see Zoom, where same thing as Lead Honestly, like our target is going after the managers, right? I don't necessarily want to be pitching HR teams. I'd rather like empower those managers, right? Let them find success with our product and their team. Let them tell other managers and let it grow within their org. And that's what we've seen time and time and time again. Someone signs up, they get successful. They're having the conversations Darby and I were having, right? 6-8 years ago in the cafeteria of like, oh, I'm really struggling with this. How are you solving it? I'm using Lead Honestly. Oh, great, cool. Let me try that. And we see that happen, right? It's just popcorn kernels in an org. One goes off, and then slowly but surely you blink and you have a dozen managers using our product. And then HR is calling us like, hey, how do we set up an organization account? How do we go through the process of becoming an actual vendor here? I see it more of that way, right? Like, I don't necessarily think we're pure B2B. I don't really think we're B2C. It's not really a marketplace. It is like this weird hybrid of somewhere in between, if you will.
It's definitely a different like customer model. But yeah, to your point, I think there's like this new type of consumer. The product isn't so expensive that as a manager I'm gonna have to get approval for expensing it. It's something that I like. If I care about my team, it's like the cost of going to get beers once with a couple folks. Like, it's really not like that big of a cost. And if I'm the type of manager who is focused on growing my team in this way, like, I'm just gonna opt in to try this thing out. I think there is this like model of, well, I'm just gonna buy the thing because it's gonna make my life easier and it's gonna make the life of my team easier. So I'll just absorb the cost, and then maybe someday like corporate will pay for it. But you want to get the problem solved, so just do that. Go ahead.
That's right back to the values though. Right. We talked a lot about how to price this, and that is such a rich discussion. I think everyone should really dig into their product, but we leaned on our values to set our price. And a lot of people will price based off the value metric or mechanic in their product, right? So, I mean, email marketing might, be based off number of emails you send or number of contacts you have. In our product, that value metric largely becomes employees. How many employees you have becomes the value you get from lead honesty, right? The more interactions you have. But I don't like that. Like it actually just kind of sits with me wrong in the scenario of like, wait, we're going to charge you more and penalize you as a manager for having success on your team, for like growing. And at some point, like we're going to make the cost of our platform prohibitive to use because you've gotten more direct reports. And now you have to pick and choose which ones you use it with or whether you use it or not at all. The cost to us is marginal at the back of this, right? Whether or not you have 5 employees or a dozen. So let's just make it one cost. Let's make it per manager and let them just have unlimited employees behind it. You see so many of our competitors go after per user, right? Be it manager or employee. And I'm sure they make a lot more money than us. And that's totally fine, right? I don't think that like aligns to the values we have of how we build it. And maybe I'll eat my words on that one day and I'll be like, we're going out of business because we can't afford it. But it's the software is like, it's easy to build, right? Like and you can do it like with incredible margins. Like we don't need to be charging per employee to make this successful. And the size of market available to all managers in the world, like we're fine. Like if we ever got above 1% of that population, I think Darby and I would be living quite well. We don't need to charge per employee, right? So that might mean a little more work for ourselves to grow the business, but I think it's done so by the values by which we care about.
Yeah, there's in the B2B and the B2C kind of world, you often hear about sort of B2B2C plays, mm-hmm. where it's either a white label something or something where businesses are sending it off to their consumers. But in a way, you're kind of describing kind of a B2C to B, where it's first, and then you can help land the businesses after.
I really like that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's, and you're right. That's especially the last, 5 to 8 years, I've been seeing more and more of these really amazing consumer products that then turn around and become B2B licenses and things like that. I think that's an important trend to point out.
Yep, absolutely.
Well, cool. This has been really, really helpful and insightful. I think, is there anything else that you would like to say to the kind of the entrepreneurs or the early stage investors listening in around just the process of building something, especially that you've been doing it kind of on the side? I think that's really unique.
And go ahead, Darby, go first.
I mean, I think, the thing that I always talk to a lot of software folks that are building something and they're trying to build their thing on the side. And the advice that I always give them is like, I won't say it again, like try to get something in the hands of your customers right away. But the other part is like balance your energy. Know when you need to take time off. If you're working a day job, it's probably pretty busy and you're probably doing a lot. And like you want to write that code on the weekends or do that stuff in the evenings. But just like make sure that you're taking care of yourself first, because nothing is gonna work out well if you're totally like, a zombie. I can tell you of times when I did that on Lead Honestly and I look at the code and it's terrible and I'm embarrassed that I wrote it. So I think I learned that lesson. So balance your energy and make sure you take care of yourself first.
Yeah, you stole what I would say. And it's been one where like, this is hard, really hard, right? So give yourself like reasonable expectations around it. I think like I did not have reasonable expectations when we got into this. Honestly, like we saw some very good growth quickly. And I was like, oh, perfect. This will be our full-time jobs in like 2 years, right? No, the things that don't work out that way. And I think at certain times, like I'd say that impacted Darby and I's relationship, but then impacted the product. And there might go 3 months where we actually don't work on it, right? And I can remember like some pretty hard conversations of like, well, hold on, why are we doing this to begin with? What's the goal behind this platform? What are our expectations for how this goes? And some heart to hearts where we just had to be like, we want to do this in a way that like helps people. We want to do it in a way that we actually enjoy building this, that it doesn't come as a burden. It's not stressful for us. It doesn't interrupt our day jobs, right? It shouldn't like impact the other things we have going on in our careers, but we do enjoy it. And there are aspects like, let's double down on those. Let's make sure like we're getting fulfilled from those. We're not getting burnt or stressed in the areas that like aren't frankly worth it to us. I think we've gotten into a really good cadence of that the last few years of just understanding what that looks like, and kind of keeping the expectations low. And we, I think, are fortunate in that as a side project, we're able to do that. It's not our full-time job. So that has been like survival for us as a side gig, quite frankly. If you make it too stressful, you're going to stop doing it, just flat out. So like, if it's a side gig for you, like keep the good balance there.
Well, gentlemen, really appreciate your time. Where can those watching or listening in learn more about the two of you and learn more about Lead Honestly?
Yeah. LinkedIn's probably the best place to get in touch with me. I have Twitter, but I'm passively on there. Somewhat on a sabbatical for the year, frankly. And then Lead Honestly, leadhonestly.com. Go check it out. Trials are free. Sign up. Send questions, send feedback. Honestly, you're gonna get one of us on that. So, we would love all and any feedback you have.
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn. That's the best place to find me too.
Cool. I'll put the links in the show notes.
Perfect.
Hey, Darby, really appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Will.
Yeah, thanks.
All right, a couple quick things before you go. Number one, I have a general newsletter where I write about health science, emerging technology, software development, startups, and a variety of different topics that we talk about on this show. So you can visit wclittle.com and hit the subscribe button, or you can actually subscribe to specific topics that you care about most. Number two, I have a portfolio company with my partners and I at Proto Ventures called Startup Rocket. If you visit startuprocket.com, there, if you are spinning up a new venture, you can receive customized coaching for your business model and the vertical that you're tackling. And it's a place for you and your teammates and your advisors and your investors to be all on the same page to make sure that you're not missing anything as you go about the important entrepreneurial work that you're about to get yourself into, or that you maybe have been into for quite some time. So thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. If you're watching, you can listen anywhere that you get your podcasts. And if you're listening, you can visit wclittle.com to view the episodes and check out the show notes for following up in more detail for any of the topics that we talked about. And if you wouldn't mind leaving a review anywhere that you watch or listen to this show, that would be super helpful, help get the word out, and helps other people consume and interact with this content. Thank you.